Hello, and welcome back to our final presentation of Mix Presents Sound for Film and Television Awards season. It's Wonder Woman 1984, presented by Warner Brothers. It's a sequel from 2017's smash hit. Diana Prince is back 70 years later, and she's doing good again, this time in Washington, D.C. We're joined today by Richard King, supervising sound editor, Jimmy Boyle, supervising sound editor, Peter J. Devlin, production sound mixer, and Gilbert Lake, the re-recording mixer from Delane Lee in London. Unfortunately, a key part of the team, Gary Rizzo, re-recording mixer, could not be with us today, but he deserves a shout out to Gary. So, Gilbert, I guess you were there in 2017, mixing the original Wonder Woman. So let's start with you. Can you give us a sense, sort of the overall track? These are blockbusters. They're meant to be big. We have a number of them out in the world these days. What makes Wonder Woman unique, if you would?
Well, I think coming into the original Wonder Woman, the first one in 2017, I think Warner Brothers, DC weren't quite sure what they had on their hands in terms of scale and size, and it really took off. I mean, people really loved that film. And it really set up, I think, the relationships in the film. There's some of those like that come into play in Wonder Woman 1984, but also it's the scale of the film. I mean, certainly that was set during the First World War, and it had that period feel and scale, and lots of big, wide sweeping shots, and a story that sort of carried right through, kind of, a bit of an era. And I think moving from that to 1984 was kind of you're already set up for some of the character, some of the superpowers involved, some of the strengths and weaknesses, but also it has a real heart to it. I think Gal Gadot brought a lot of emotion to the performance, and I think Patty as well, Patty Jenkins directed, really sort of put a lot of heart and hope into that film, and I think that's also the case in Wonder Woman 1984. I think that film is really a lot about hope and, sort of overcoming adversity, which I think we all know a bit about at the
moment. These days. Before we get to the superpowers, the battles, the scene, Peter, let's start with you. On production, superhero movies are slightly different on production. There's a lot of locations. We have busy scenes. We're inside the Smithsonian, the malls, we're out in the desert. Could you talk to us a bit about the production track, how that works?
Sure. One of the things I get asked by people that kind of aren't in the industry, they say, well, when it comes to the dialogue, don't they do that afterwards? But we work very hard on location to capture the performance, to make it easier for the guys, the colleagues in post-production, not to go and basically ADR the actors again, which is replace a performance which the actors are investing a lot to give that performance in the day. So with Wonder Woman, I'd worked with Patty before on a film, Monster, back in 2004 with Charlize Theron. So I know that she's very much in tune with the difficulties that we can face in production sound. So I always had her ear. But, from whether it be in the Smithsonian, which was on stage in London, and in Washington, D.C. on the big exteriors, we're just always trying to kind of minimize the background noise, trying to isolate those tracks, try to give as clean a recording as possible for post to be able to do the work that they need to do. So, yeah, I mean, one of the sets was the Royal College of Surgeons in London, and that was kind of a crucial scene. It's where Diana is reunited with Steve Trevor, played by Chris Pine. And I remember locations saying to me just as I'd arrived in London, you need to go visit this location. It could be a bit of a problem for you. And that was because where they meet in the scene is underneath kind of like a semi-spherical ceiling piece. So there was a really unusual acoustic in there. So I suggested we put acoustical foam in there, but we were told we can't touch anything. So what we did is we floated balloons up there right above them to kind of break it up. And that was kind of one of those things that we kind of had to figure out on the day. So anyway, we're just always trying to keep the performances true and authentic, and give the guys in post-production the original tracks to hopefully that will make it all the way through to the final mix.
Excellent. One of the things I was struck by in watching it was some of the interiors. This is a big film. We open, with a dramatic scene of Diana as a young girl, and then we go straight to 1984 in a mall in Washington, a very busy scene.
We won't be doing that today.
Talk to us about some of that chaos and the introduction of Diana, because that's really the modern Diana. Very chaotic scene. Richard, do you want to start the mall scene?
Yeah, Patty wanted it. It is kind of the reveal of Wonder Woman as Wonder Woman, and Patty wanted it to be a good action scene, but also be a bit lighthearted, not be too serious. So the crowd reactions, the backgrounds, a lot of which are Peter Devlin's recordings. We also did a lot of group. So she wanted to kind of modulate those crowd sounds so they weren't, people weren't too scared. It wasn't too panicky. It was more reactive to, to what was going on. So it needed to have kind of a lighthearted feel to it.
It's slightly different than you worked on Dark Knight, another DC comic, slightly different than the crowds there, I might imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it was somebody pulls a gun. We didn't want everybody to react as if someone yelled, "There's a gun." Somebody's got a gun now. It would be a totally different reaction. This would have been the reaction of the '80s, and then Jimmy and I had a lot of. It was also the first time we see her kind of powers come into play, and Patty had asked us early on to reimagine a lot of the sounds from the original film, elaborate upon them, and so we were given license to broaden out the a little bit and the sound and the complexity of the sounds of all her powers.
Jimmy, do you want to step in? Let's talk about her powers for a minute, because there's a lot of swooshing. There's a lasso of truth. There's a tiara. There's a lot of swirling. Tell us about what makes Wonder Woman Wonder Woman.
It was good, really good fun. As Richard said, it was kind of, we were given license to reimagine sounds from previous, and obviously she'd appeared in the other movies in the DC universe. But it was good fun because we were able to play with ideas, and like the lasso was one thing. It was something that we were able to try new things with, and not go off key from what was in the previous movies, but play with ideas, and that was really good fun. But this opening scene you mentioned was a really good example of that, with the lasso and all of her powers, and basically we were told to have fun with it, just have fun with it, which is what we did. And as Richard mentioned, Patty's main thing was it's not don't make it too menacing. We are going to have fun within this scene, and we wanted to be fun, but and play with it. But we had that scene is a good example of what we did with a lot of her powers and things, of the lasso, of her jumping, of her moving. We had real fun in that scene. I mean, I loved the bit where she takes the guy out, flips him upside down, grabs him by the foot, and we had this idea that we wanted the change to fall out of his pockets, which was not something that we came up with that idea and just thought it'd be fun, and everyone loved that idea. Everyone thought, just laughed and thought it was great, and say it was just something that we come up with. But that was the the feeling that we wanted to try and go for with that was just to have fun with it and play with it, and I think we achieved it. And it was great. I mean, it was that's I think what we were trying to go for, especially with the opening. You know, especially once we've been to Themyscira, once we've gone to Washington, 1984, set the scene. You can tell that in the way it's shot, the way it looks. You know, that really, I think, feels the setup of the style and the flavour of the movie. Which, so it was good fun.
Yeah, and if I can just say, I was such a huge fan of the Superman movies, and just tonally, how Richard Donner handled humor. I just loved, that opening. I mean, I was there, and when I was watching it on Christmas Day with my family, and I was laughing. It was a lovely, fun sequence, a great introduction.
Yeah, very fun. And then Gilbert, she goes up, she goes down, she swings around the side. There's a tiara that bounces in circles, and you're in a big theater here. How do you start playing with dimension, I suppose, in a scene like that?
Well, I think Jimmy's hit the nail on the head with that. It's a hugely playful scene, and I think there's Hans's music is playing that kind of tongue-in-cheek kind of jauntiness through the whole thing. And there's definitely a rhythm to all the sound effects that are in there. And that rhythm sort of works really well when it can play with the music and poke through the music, and you can feel those moments, interacting with the music. And I think Hans' score really allowed that. There's definite builds and stops and, beats that we can hit with him and apart from him. And some of that is moving the sounds around us. So, using the walls, using the ceiling, feeling like the powers, not just sort of visually in her lasso and on the screen, but also, we can sort of play with just the sort of energy of them. And so they definitely, we use the room a lot in that sequence and throughout the whole film. I mean, it's one of the, it's the most fun you can have, is panning sounds around the room. It's, really great fun. So we really, we go to town on that stuff and really enjoy that stuff. And I think it shows in that moment. I think there's a lovely balance between action and adventure and humor and heart. And I think that's in a lot of the film, it comes through in a lot of the film. But that scene that you picked out particularly just has that kind of all combined, I think.
How does that manifest itself in sound then from jaunty? I mean, do your punches become a little more menacing? Do you change tone and character in them? I mean, how do you?
A lot of it's driven by the action and what's happening in those scenes, and that quite often means that the sounds are more powerful. They're more emphatic. They're more dangerous sounding. That would definitely apply in both of those sequences I mentioned. The punches are bigger, much bigger. When somebody hits a wall, you really feel like they get hurt. In the opening mall scene, there's never really a sense that nobody really gets hurt. But that tone changes, about 2/3 of the way through the film.
Jimmy, you want to add to that? I mean, in the design definitely. As you move through the movie?
I totally agree with Richard. I think that's something that we definitely discussed, but also is driven by watching the film and getting and look at for me, and that's the way you approach everything. You look at it, feel the story, feel the mood, and that drives us to do what we do within a scene for what sound you want to add. And I think that's just something that we work on and that we figure out as we go. But definitely, I mean, now you mention it, thinking about it, absolutely. You start the film, we go to Washington, 84, we introduce the place, it is lighthearted. And then it's completely different when we end up in the White House and in Cairo and those scenes where, the stakes are higher within the movie. So that, for me, is just something that story-wise means that you change what you do.
You change the character, the sound. Gilbert, I mean, how does that pacing work in the mix? Is it suddenly, do you feel more intense, or what happens here?
Yeah, I think you do. You I mean, we're on that same journey. We do it over months and months, but we're on that same journey that the film's taking. We're on that arc, and usually, and in this, it was the case with this. We're sort of working through the reels, on starting with temp mixes, and we're sort of progressing through the film and towards the end. And you're feeling the story and the jeopardy, and you're getting used to, what we need to feel from certain characters, and we're traveling with that film right through the process. I think also a big part of it is that it's a collaboration. So, you know, Patty's driving that as well. And obviously Patty's influencing the score, and Hans is bringing something to it as well. And we're all kind of traveling in that direction. So I think we're all, you know, we're involved with the story. We're trying to tell that story. So we're all kind of in that intensity. And certainly I think the film soundtracks and the films that, you know, work best, they have that arc, and the sound of those films is no different. It has that arc, you know, going from, you know, a sort of certain kind of feel and a flavor at the beginning, in this sense, like playfulness, all the way to kind of, you know, bombast and big stakes and jeopardy, and then finally resolution. So I sort of hope that comes through.
And I always like to ask this type of question. It may seem like a cliche, but each film presents challenges, and no two superhero movies are alike. No two DC movies are alike. Peter, let's start. I mean, you've done a whole range. I mean, in production sound, you'll do everything from, as you said, monster to this. So, what was different this time around? This is pre-pandemic, first of all, everybody.
Sure.
But go ahead, Peter.
Well, just I don't know if the rest of the guys know this story, but when we shot the scene where Barbara Minerva goes out for lunch with Gal Gadot, we're shooting in a hotel in DC, and it was opposite the White House. And on that particular day, I guess there was some construction work going on over there, and it was a sound of jackhammers. And this, you know, this is a scene which is pretty crucial. It's their first meeting. And it's not the one that you want to say, well, this may be looped. So there was an element of like, how are we going to get this one? And I remember going over to the locations department and asking, could anybody go over to the White House and see if they could maybe hold that for us? And of course, the look of shock, really? But they went over. They tried to get them to stop the work for a little bit, and the answer was a big no. But I have to say that Gary and Gilbert, everybody, they saved that scene, because when I heard it in the trailer, and it sounded like it was compressed, and I said, oh, they're going to have to ADR this. But when I saw it in the final film, they saved it. So kudos to you guys, because, you know, you could see the wind blowing. I couldn't hear any jackhammers, and you guys did your magic.
Whereabouts?
And he and the dialogue editor too. He worked.
Ian, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, shout out to Ian.
Excellent.
Where exactly was that, Peter?
It was just opposite the White House. It was a hotel. I can't remember the name of it, but we're on the top floor.
Well, where does that fall? Where does that fall?
Oh, it's when
it's early on, when Barbara and Gal go out for lunch, and they ask, you know, have you ever been in love? And
of course,
yeah.
Yes, in the restaurant.
That's right,
With
in the restaurant.
Glass, and you have glass behind you
Yeah.
too. You have a whole wall of glass at that point too.
Yeah.
I think, which can't be easy at all times as well.
Yeah,
I think the space
above
was
the
difficult,
city,
but it's
lots of traffic.
exactly. Yeah.
It's a challenge for production.
and then when we were shooting in Pennsylvania Avenue, the scene where Diana renounces her wish, which was incredibly. I mean, Chris Pine and Gal are amazing together. But, you know, this is the start of the movie, and they're having to do the end of the movie, and they just absolutely nailed it. But on this particular day, Patty was in her tent, and Jeff Sessions, who was then Attorney General, decided to visit, because we were just shooting right by the Justice Department. So that was a pretty interesting day with the Secret Service making an appearance amongst the chaos of the day.
It might be a little more shut down today. Richard and Jimmy, you've done a number of superhero movies, and they tone. How do you make it different? How do you bring your own sense to it? Something like this.
Well, I think you just follow the lead of the film, and you know, let it tell you what it needs. And of course, each director has their own, you know, vision for ultimately what the film will be. But I think the film tells you a lot if you just listen to it and watch it and get into the style of it and the feel of it. And it's not you know, there certainly aren't like rules to follow or guidelines or you know, this type of superhero requires this or that. And even within some superheroes, I mean, there were lighthearted Batman films, and then there were very dark Batman films. So it's really it's really the story that the director wants to tell using that device of a superhero.
Jenny?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head for me, Richard, and said pretty much every point I would have tried to cover. And I think that goes for most films you work on. You get on the movie, you have a sense of how it, should play. If you're working on a romantic comedy or superhero movie or whatever it be, you watch it and you get a sense of how it should play, and then you have the discussion with the director and talk about how they want it to be. And I think, as you said, that's a development that happens as you work on the movie. You figure it out. That's part of the fun. That's what you're doing a lot of the time is trying to figure out what works. I've been on so many films where you get a brief at the beginning that then it gets changed, and that's something that you working with the director and the other people within the show figure out as you go, because you decide actually that doesn't really work out as well as we want it to. But yeah, absolutely, I think for this, definitely that we just figured out what Patty wanted, what the film wanted, and then tried to execute it.
I think one thing that felt like a point of difference, but also I think was one of the most challenging sequences in the film is right at the end we go into a transmission bunker, and it's kind of like the final denouement of the film. So it's like, I think a lot of big blockbustery superhero films end with cacophonous battle and a feeling of victory and the end. I think that scene was such a challenge because it goes to a crescendo. There's a lot of power in the moment. There's a lot of wind movement and paper movement and this huge transmission machine working and wishes flying all over the place. And it really turns in an instant into a very subtle performance with very little sound around it. And then into this kind of emotional crescendo, which I think feels to me like a sort of a new kind of way of attacking the end of a film, the end of a superhero film. It felt like a very different emotional payoff at the end of that sequence. And I think a lot of credit goes to Peter for, that's, some of the performance in there is, hugely interrupted by wind machines and movement. I don't know how that was to shoot. But, Patty's so wedded to the production sound, and it was, very important for her to get it in there. And, there was a huge amount of effort went into that sequence in terms of design of the machine and the movement of the air and the movement of the wishes, and then hands on top of all that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you to our audience for sticking with us today for Mix Presents Sound for Film and Television Awards season. Go out and watch some movies, people. Thank you very much.